it's put them in this bind where it feels where we're talking about they have to sweep. Counsell can say you win every series, you feel good about things. Sure. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with Patrick Mooney. We are your Cubs beat writers at The Athletic. Patrick, we finally saw a sweep. I was in Pittsburgh. I started that series off by asking Counsell whether they need to start sweeping teams. And he's like, Sahadev, we just need to take it one game at a time. He's like, I'm just focusing on today. All right, I got you. But as that game, I mean, that was one of the wildest games because I think most people were checked out by inning 5.
Yes.
The first couple innings were pretty exciting in the sense that you scored 3 runs off Paul Skeens in 2 innings. You're feeling good about yourself, right? The Cubs must have been feeling good. Kyle Hendricks didn't have it. The Pirates got to him again, and that looked ugly at one point. And that comeback, one of the more exciting ones I've covered, one of the more unexpected turn of events that I've seen in over a decade of covering Cubs baseball. So I mean, fans should be excited. The Cubs certainly were, and Christian Bethancourt gets a lot of love from everyone, and deservedly so. He's been insanely good in like 30 or so plate appearances. I think less than that maybe for the Cubs.
Yeah, and that was a classic. I was thinking of you, a classic beat writer. It's like getaway day. You've got a flight out after the game. It's Skeens. They've already won 2 games, but you have to kind of watch for the sweep because that's obviously what they needed to do there. And then to have like a football score put up, a Skeens getting some runs off Skeens. Kyle Hendricks either not pitching well and that didn't get great defense behind him either. You'd think they'd kind of pack it in, or just, this offense has been such a disappointment overall this year. And then to see them with the big hits, the 2-out hits, the sustained rally, it really was kind of jaw-dropping. I'm curious, like walking into the clubhouse after that game, what was the mood like? What was the vibe like?
Yeah, I mean, it was all, smiles and giggles. Everybody was quite happy. And unsurprisingly, Counsell, someone joked, I saw on Twitter, there was a video of Counsell and they're like, he's smiling.
Yes.
So Counsell, yes, he was happy. I mean, you don't see many games like that. They were down 10-3 going into the 7th inning, and a guy that they picked up off waivers was the hero. Had 7 RBI, 6 of them coming, 2 each in innings 7, 8, and 9, including the go-ahead 2 RBI single. I mean, that's a fun game, and like the guys, like I'm not sure if anyone's heard him speak or read any of his quotes, but he's a fun quote. He's a good dude, seemingly a good dude. Great quote there about like somebody was chirping at him and telling him he stinks. He's like, and in his head, he's like, you can't stink now. And like, I have to prove him wrong that I don't stink.
Pittsburgh is one of those places when it's empty, you can kind of hear people yelling on the field. And especially that day, looking in the stands, it was even more exaggerated that effect.
It's to the point where how the press box is there. It's pretty high up, but it's also like right next to fans in a sense, and like the windows are always open there, and I could hear like things being said. You can like hear conversations. It's crazy. That's and I understand why fans aren't going to that team's games. That's not a rip of the fans there. It's just like when it's empty like that, it's crazy how much you can hear, and it clearly got to Bethancourt, and he was able to come through. But that, I mean, yes, the vibes are good right now, and I was looking some things up, Patrick. I know. Look, you play bad teams, you need to get good results. Like that's how it should be. We've been talking about this stretch of games for a while. August is supposed to be easy for them, easy quote unquote, but so was it June? June was supposed to be easy as well. They didn't take advantage of it. They're taking advantage of it now. They have the second best offense by weighted runs created plus in August for this month. They came into this series against the Pirates ready to face Mitch Keller, Jared Jones, Paul Skeens. That's a series that you look at. I don't care that it's the Pirates. That's tough. You look at that, you're like, this team could score like 5 runs combined or something or less. And they scored 41 runs. They knocked out the starters for the Pirates pitched a combined 13 innings, right? Keller and Jones went 4 each. They're putting up much better at bats. They look better. They're able to cover for Isaac Paredes not looking great at the plate. Michael Busch is in like a mini slump. He's slightly below average for the month. They're able to cover for that because others are stepping up. And guys like Bethancourt, guys like Miguel Amaya, Pete Crow Armstrong is having one of the best months in the game and just is terrorizing pitchers when on the mound. Like that game on Monday, you could see the pitchers, the second he got on, they were uncomfortable. They didn't, they had to think about him, and they had, especially with Yasmani Grandal behind the plate, they had no chance. He's a menace out there, and he messes with pitchers. I asked him about it, and he was like, I don't think of it exactly like that, like screwing with the pitcher, but it's like, I do like to know that, it does feel good that I can impact the game that way and kind of get in their heads.
And PCA is obviously his own man and not going to make Javi Baez comparisons all the time, but PNC Park was where Javi had that crazy play where he broke the Pirates' brain of that ball where he was running towards first, ran back, and just I'm not doing a good job describing it, but if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably seen it before. And PCA just has that ability to cause havoc and make the other team put pressure on the other team and make them uncomfortable. And that is really what I've been missing as a whole for months at a time, right? It just seemed like the opposing pitching staff just found their lanes. They had their plan of attack. They had a lot of margin for error. They didn't have to worry that much about damage. And now when you see a lineup rolling like this, I don't know if you can say what could have been, where has this been for a while? And I also don't think you can overestimate it and start anointing guys for next season. I do think it's part of the evaluations, part of what you had mentioned, Sahadev, and what you had kind of asked Jed, and how Jed had said, these after the trade deadline, these final 2 months will be big just to make sure this group wasn't the worst offensive collection in baseball this side of the White Sox. And you have seen some signs of life.
Let's talk about procrastination. When you have millions of things to do, but we end up getting lost in our phones? I've been working with a new secret weapon to kick procrastination to the curb, Thesis.
Thesis is a brain-boosting supplement made with natural ingredients to support faster reaction times, speed up mental activation, and help improve concentration.
For a limited time, FT listeners can save $60 on their first subscription order with code FOUL at takethesis.com. That's $60 off your first order at takethesis.com with promo code FOUL.
As a parent with multiple jobs, a lot on my mind, and a high bar for wellness goals, I'm looking for an edge to improve productivity and focus, and that's hitting for me with Thesis.
So take the free 3-minute quiz to find out what your brain needs. Head to takethesis.com and use code FOUL to save $60 on your first subscription order when you sign up for Thesis. That's $60 off your first order at takethesis.com with code FOUL. Maximize your mind with Thesis today.
Yeah, it continues, right? They have 6 more against sub 500 teams. So DC, then Pirates before Yankees come to town. And it's not like the Yankees, a lot of this is when do you catch the team, right?
Yeah.
The Nationals are probably playing better than their record says. They just called up their top prospect in Dylan Cruz. So maybe this is a bad time to get the Nationals, but it's definitely a good time to get the Pirates, who the second you get to their bullpen, the offense gets ultra confident. and it could be a good time to get the Yankees. They're not playing their best. Like April and May was a terrible time to play the Yankees. Right now is maybe a good time to play the Yankees. We'll see. We'll see what happens this weekend. Have they, like, some of these numbers are just kind of insane. Like Bethancourt's numbers. Look, when we get like these short views of players, it totally distorts who they are. Like you look at his career numbers and you're like, how is the guy we're watching have those career numbers? Because every single time he comes to the plate, he crushes the ball. He hit that ball that he hit through the infield was hit at 105.9 miles per hour. And I think his home run was higher than that, like 106 something. So, I mean, the guy hits the ball hard every single time. This quote, I don't know. I just love this quote from Counsell. It's from Andy Haynes. And it's so simple, but I think we overlook it. I know we as media do this. We watch 2 months of baseball and make grand conclusions, and that's partly our job, right? We're supposed to make conclusions. Fans do it after 2 games. But this is a quote from Andy Haynes that Counsell said the other day. It takes a long time to have a good season, and it takes a long time to have a bad season. He was talking about Miguel Amaya, and I think it holds true for everyone. It holds true for every player and all the teams. Like you cannot. We want to judge them off little snippets of the season, and part of it is fair, I think. But ultimately, they have another 28 games of baseball to show us what they can do. We talked about this before. You wrote a little bit about it. I have a snippet of it in a piece coming up for Friday morning. But Craig Counsell's teams always play well down the stretch. He came back in 18 from 5 games down. He came back, I think it was 7 or 7.5 games back in 18, 5 games back in 19. Last season, it was like 17-11, 17-9 in August and September. Like they just play well down the stretch. Whether that's good enough or not is going to be determined by how Atlanta and the Mets and other teams play. The Cubs don't have that. They screwed up to the point where they don't have their destiny in their hands, right? They don't control things. But I think there's something to Counsell knows how to get his team, build his team up and get them ready to play in August and September.
To lose in the first round of playoffs.
Right, to lose. But also, they're like maybe if the Cubs start acting like the Cubs and get more talent, that allows it to be more than just this is for the future, right? But that allows it to be more than just like, okay, I can if I maneuver things right, like now you have the talent and the actual ammo to go out there and put a full 6 months together. I think that will be the difference maker, right? That's what it was supposed to be all along. Like he goes from Milwaukee to Chicago. There's a reason for that. Now they need to leverage that. There's still a month of baseball to play. It's easy to be optimistic after the games they've just played. I don't want to get too carried away. It was fun to watch this series and to watch yesterday's game just because you don't get to cover games like a 10-3 comeback where they win 14-10 and have a guy like Christian Bethancourt have that moment was kind of nice when you're released from the Marlins and then you have that moment and you're feeling good about yourself. It's just a nice little moment if nothing else.
2 newsy items I wanted to ask you about. Wednesday's game, Kyle Hendricks did not finish the second inning. Obviously, the bullpen had to carry the load that day. What do you got on Drew Smyly as well as Jorge Lopez?
Yeah, Smyly is a Cub. He cleared waivers. He's a Cub for the rest of the season. That can take a life of its own when those reports come out because a lot of guys get put on waivers. Now, it would have looked bad, in my opinion, if he got claimed. It would have looked bad for the Cubs. That's a dumping money and a team that's not out of the race, losing a guy that was impacting their team in a positive manner, right? Like he was helping their team. they're still clinging to hope. They're fighting for it. That would have looked bad on the outside, and I don't think it would have sat well with players in the clubhouse.
No way.
I just can't imagine. Like, I know Hector Neris was well liked, but Drew Smyly, man, this guy wanted to come back when they were stinking. He loves this place. He loves the coaches. Good guy. I don't think that would have gone over well. Jorge Lopez, something like he's got a groin injury. It apparently occurred Monday night. You knew something was up when he didn't pitch on Wednesday. It made no sense to pitch Porter Hodge 36 pitches. After the game, Counsell did say that his bullpen was short. I asked him, I was like, did you consider? I was like, you went to your high leverage guys, like it got to 10-5, and you went to your high leverage guys. Did you have a feeling like you were in this still? And he's like, that's all I had left. I was like, gotcha, okay. And that's part of the reason why he didn't pull. Like, you want to, pulling Hendricks earlier. Like, if you watch that game, you probably had a feeling like pretty early on, ooh, Kyle Hendricks is walking guys. He's getting hit. Like, I don't know if he has it.
Yeah.
It's hard to pull a guy earlier than 1 2/3. But like when you watch him, it probably was like, do you pull him? But I think he was trying to get more innings because of the bullpen short. So with Lopez, obviously, like, I don't think you can gloss over this. Like, that would be significant. Like, it's a groin injury. He's been utterly dominant. Essentially, their co-closer with Porter Hodge. Right now, it seems up in the air. Like they're going to evaluate this day to day. Whether he's ready to go Friday, I don't think that's happening. But I think they're going to say, like, okay, let's see Saturday. Maybe can they push Saturday? I think that depends on how things go on Friday. Can they push to Sunday? Again, that depends on how things go on Saturday. So, like, this is, I think, through the weekend, we're going to be monitoring this. Is he on the IL or not? Then the question is, who steps up? Is it Daniel Palencia, who hasn't looked great since coming up? Like, he's a mystery, right? Like, typical, like that prototypical guy that dominates AAA comes up, just doesn't quite have it, just doesn't quite do what needs to be done. I'll give Keegan Thompson some credit. Whenever he's come up, he's performed pretty well this season. So maybe he's the guy that steps up. Julian Merriweather is on the IL. If fans missed that, he was down. His velocity was down like 2 or 3 ticks on Sunday. It was like almost like 4.5 ticks from last year. His velocity was down Sunday's outing. It's right knee tendonitis. Obviously, that's his driving foot, right? Like his back foot for pitching, his back leg. So that's going to impact you. It's something that's on and off. You would hope that he could have helped the team after what he did last season, but this is relievers. There's a reason he was available on the waiver wire before last season, and there's a reason you can't just say, like, well, our bullpen's fixed. We got pitcher 1, 2, and 3, because by the end of the season, pitcher 1, 2, and 3 could, be DFA'd or be injured or just be ineffective. That's the reality of bullpens. So you better not assume you have anything, which is why, the Cubs need to continue. Like, they need to continue to fortify this area, right? They need to find ways. Counsell's great at that, but they don't have a lot of time to figure this out. You really have to hope that this Lopez injury is not an actual injury and is just, like something minor.
Yeah, and we don't mean to sound like meatheads when it's like they need to sweep. Like, that's just kind of how the math plays out.
It's a situation they put themselves in.
Yeah, and but I say that because, like, one of Counsell's things is, like, and you brought this to my attention a while ago, of like, sometimes you have to know how to lose, right? And if you are constantly using your high leverage guys, and that's what happens when you're winning. Joe Madden would always make that point, like, when you get on one of those stretches, you're going to lean on your best relievers. But when guys go down, when you have to sweep series, when you're starting pitching isn't locked in, or maybe, the offense has obviously performed well here recently, but if they go back to those quiet nights, as Counsell has repeatedly said, then all of a sudden it gets harder. And I will say their playoff odds are almost the inverse of what it was last September, when they were just above 90, and now I think the last I saw was almost 7%. So like, crazy things will happen over this stretch here. Obviously the Braves are playing well, and even though they've had injuries, they were a team that on paper, I think everyone expected to win 90 plus games and make the playoffs. So I don't get this feeling like they're totally playing out of their minds or above their heads. And they have closed some ground in terms of passing some teams, and that's important as well. Obviously, the head-to-head tiebreakers do not go in their favor here. And I do think, too, watching the Pirates this week, part of the missed opportunity to me feels like the Pirates clearly didn't take that step forward this year, even with Skeen's brilliance, and with a pitcher like that, or really any pitcher. It's hard to bank on like 6+ years in terms of that club control window, right? So when he's dominating, you got to capitalize. And the Reds certainly have like interesting players, and a ballpark where their offense plays up, and they've been a tough matchup for the Cubs recently, but they have not taken that step forward that they had sort of planned on. And the Cardinals, they did their patchwork veteran starting pitcher thing, and it has not been an overwhelming success. And some of those star players they're built around have been either injured or ineffective, or some combination of both. And obviously they took Counsell away from Milwaukee, and the Brewers traded Corbin Burns. And so like, to see them in this spot it is certainly a disappointment. And like you said, they have a little over a month to change their fortunes and just keep playing all the way until the final out of game 162. But I think this series in Pittsburgh encapsulated just kind of a weird season overall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an odd one. That like you can always go back to different things. Last year it was that Washington and Miami series on the road. This season, May and June, it's going to be just I will go back to Jameson Taillon in Milwaukee, kind of saying like, it started off as like a bad week, and then it just kept getting like, and it just kept stacking up, and like more and more bad series happened. And it's like how they went from like, this is going to turn, to what is happening. And they were just like kind of perplexed at like, why aren't we winning more? We're better than this. And I think now they're showing that they are better than that. Those 2 months, the records, like they're not a 9 below 500 team, but that's going to cost, like, it's put them in this bind where it feels, where we're talking about they have to sweep. Counsell can say you win every series, you feel good about things, sure.
Yeah.
But you're 5.5 games out of a playoff spot right now. So it's that they could end up with 85, 86 wins, and you could say like that's about where everyone projected them, if not better. It's still not the playoffs, and that's the goal. Get to the postseason. I'm assuming that doesn't get them to the playoffs. Maybe weird things happen. Baseball's odd, but
I do think too, like, justifiably for a long time we talked about the mediocrity of the National League, and I realized there aren't these like 100-win powerhouses like kind of staring us in the face, but like the Diamondbacks reached the World Series last year.
Yeah,
the Padres have always been this like interesting experiment, and they brought in a new manager, and they have some star talent, and they were able to like adjust on the fly. They added a lot, obviously. from Dylan Cease to Arias, the batting champ. So like they've pulled away, and I don't think it's like a total shock that like how those teams were built, that they could do that, and we just haven't seen that from the Cubs yet. I do think looking at this Nationals team, they remind me of what Joe Madden liked to say. Like they look a little like frisky, you know what I mean? And they got DJ Hers, the ex-Cub prospect, pitching this weekend. They've got some really interesting returns from the Soto deal and some of the other moves they've made here. They're a team that has obviously under Mike Rizzo taken kind of more of an old school scouting approach, and they've done it before. I mean, they built it from almost nothing and turned it into a World Series champion. So I do think we can't expect the Cubs to just like walk in there and sweep, just they're under 500. But I think it'll be an interesting test and kind of a way for us to think about some of the frustrations, I've noticed on social media when things weren't going well, of people and I think we've had some of these questions too of like, why isn't Counsell blowing up in the dugout or in his press conferences? Like, why are these guys so flatline a lot of the times in the clubhouse? Like, this is why, right? Like, to give yourself a chance to turn things around and to not overreact. And, that obviously is a good way to go about things in general. It can just be hard to watch at times when things aren't going well. And, maybe in the end, they'll be proven right here. They've at least given themselves a chance to play meaningful games in September, which is not the ultimate goal, as you say, but it's also not nothing either.
Yeah, I think 2 of 3 against the Nationals, and you feel good about a 7-2 road trip. Yeah, right. 7-2 road trip. That's solid. And you talk about the Nationals, they're getting written about like this up and coming team that could make some noise in free agency this winter. We'll see if they actually do that, and if they actually are an up and coming team. Those things are so hard to predict. But they're not a pushover right now. That's
a credit to Davey Martinez too. Obviously, know him, that he really gets his guys to play and believe. And that was an example we had used prior to the 2019 Nationals, where it looked sort of buried there. And obviously that was very early in the season, but that Davey Martinez is very much a stay in the fight. He kind of has that, some of Joe Madden's principles, but also really a different sort of edge as someone who played in the majors forever, it seems like, and can really, I think, communicate with players and has a lot of credibility day to day on the ground.
Yep, absolutely. It won't be easy to beat them, and I'm interested to see how Dylan Cruz does. I think he had his first homer Wednesday against the Yankees. So young players can always mess up a series. You call up, you have random young players come up, and he's not a random young player. He's a top 3 prospect in the game. So you never know what will happen. This will not be an easy series in my eyes. I said that about the Pirates series though too, with Keller and Jones and Skeens going. So we'll see what happens. The Cubs need to keep winning series and sprinkling in some sweeps is kind of a must going forward. We'll see if they keep it rolling. We'll be back at you later this week with one more podcast, and then the homestand next week as well. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for us, please, and subscribe to The Athletic, where you can read Patrick and my work all season long and into the offseason on the Cubs. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Appreciate you. Take care.